you so much for this warm introduction. I'm very happy and privileged to be here for the third time. It's a great conference and definitely one of my favorite events in Europe. Yes, so let's get started. I'm a great fan of Inigo Montoya's School of Introduction. So just a polite greeting to begin with, a bit about myself, establish a personal link or why we are here, and then manage expectation in terms of what you can get from this presentation, what you can learn, what you can ask me about later. So just a bit about myself. I'm currently a senior analyst at Standard Chartered's client and third-party intelligence team. You have already met my colleague Slowik, who was opening presentation. I think it's quite cool that Standard Chartered open and closes the first day. I'm dealing with the victim analytics, breach notification, exploitation of intelligence coming from the incidents we can observe and analyze at Standard Chartered's client and vendors. I'm also teaching assistant at SANS Institute, so if you will be taking FOR578 Cyber Threat Intelligence course, we might meet. And this year I'm a fellow at European Cyber Conflict Research Initiative, so I'm also tackling this bit of geopolitical angle of the cybersecurity issues. Just a short disclaimer, of course, any opinions, conclusion, views that I will present here are strictly my own and do not represent position of any employer that I am associated with. And of course, feel free to reach out. You have my mail and Twitter handle, and I'm quite easy to find. So yeah, please feel free to reach out. In terms of why we are here, what brings us here, and how can I help, is I would like to talk about the role of infrastructure analysis in threat intelligence, and how it can help doing it in a structured manner to proceed in this very repeatable way, to have long-term traffic, to exploit all the information you can have from analyzing the infrastructure. And infrastructure analysis is quite a unique field, let's say, of threat intelligence, because it allows us to track the activities long term because of how the infrastructure has to be set up. It is in a way quite vulnerable to analysis. I mean, C2 servers for them to work have to be ultimately exposed to the internet, have to be out there in one way or another. So the main issues that we will have is the wealth of the data. Essentially, when we go to shutdown on census, you will see the millions of hosts, probably billions of services that has been scanned by those services. Just so it's a matter of picking out and decreasing, or rather increasing, the signal to noise ratio, so we can have the valuable insight for both the operational side and tactical side of the security operations. Infrastructure analysis is also quite unique in that it allows us to extend our visibility of the kill chain, because usually when we talk about the intrusion analysis, we will have some visibility from, let's say, initial access vectors toward actions on objective. But for reconnaissance weaponization, those are not so easy to capture, often lost within the visibility that we'll have. But if we have this proactive approach to the infrastructure analysis, if we are constantly looking for the infrastructure that is being set out in preparation for operation, we can have some insights into reconnaissance. We can perhaps try to see the hosts that are already conducting scanning or reaching out to our network without malicious payload yet. We can see some signs of weaponization, so that we can see staging for the payloads. We can see the phishing pages being prepared to conduct then attacks. And as such, we can extend, or rather complement what is being gathered by this empty space here by intrusion analysis. So exploitation and installation phases working together with the incident responders to have complete picture. And because this is a CTI conference and this is intelligence activity, of course, I'm a great fan of working clickers. Okay, so yeah, I'm a great fan of applying the intelligence cycle and a structured approach to such activity. In terms of infrastructure analysis, of course, the most important factor will be what are our plans, what is the purpose for which we are conducting those. So setting up a correct planning and direction in terms of intelligence requirements. So whether we want to focus more on the proactive strategic hunting, or we need to support security operation because they need constantly to see and block or detect at least new nodes. In terms of collection, we need to decide whether we want to stay on the passive side or have some active efforts like scanning or interaction with the services, how much visibility is provided by the vendors that we are using. But probably the most difficult part will come from the processing analysis. As I noted, the wealth of data is there. It's just a matter of how much we can ingest first in the platform of our choice or any analysis tool, and then in terms of after processing them, how much we can extract from those. And finally, we will shortly touch on that at the very end of the presentation, is that dissemination, because many of you might be quite wary of indicator feeds, providing malicious IPs to block and so on, because it does not provide much value due to constant rotation and very low shelf life. So we'll touch a bit on that. But in terms of the planning, we could approach this probably from the two angles. One is this tactical one, where it supports the operation like SOC operations, perhaps hunting operations based on retro hunting in the environment for signs of activity related to C2 servers, but also on this operational and strategic angle, which probably I am more involved with, trying to map out the activity that can affect standard chartered ecosystem. So having the visibility into infrastructure that is being prepared for attacks, and the infrastructure that's targeting some other entities of standard charter. So based on the use of certain patterns, certain logos, certain characteristics that are used that can direct us to having this external visibility into preparation to attack, we can have this much nicer visibility into what is going on. In terms of the sources, we can divide them basically into this general internet scanning services like Shodan, probably most popular, that will provide us visibility into everything essentially. We see those on the lower level, let's say, that are submission by users, so something that's probably already is a matter of active campaign like VirusTotal, like URL scan. And at the lower level, we will see threat intelligence exchanges of various kinds, where we will already see probably the threat researcher reports, the notification about campaigns, and some analysis already applied. So for the challenges that we will encounter during that, the most common one is that it's super easy currently to create infrastructure that will blend in very nicely. You can have the free tier of AWS or any other cloud provider. You can set up any region that you would like. The privacy protection is very, very common. So probably just basing on characteristics like this will not be super useful. So how to move on from that? Actually, we have a guy here in the audience, or he might not be in the audience anymore, who was elemental to my research and approach. So it was Joe Slowik, and he came up in 2020 with this idea of treating the infrastructure objects as composite indicators. So instead of relying on a single feature, instead of relying on the single characteristic or just the indicator itself, like IP address, we should actually break it down and identify the relationship and how much we can pick into how it was created at all. But of course, this sounds very easy in theory, but when we try to apply it in a structured manner, when we try to do it in a repeatable manner, I at least came to the issue that there are many characteristics, and I got just lost chasing rabbit holes and trying to fully scope certain indicator, but pivoting too much or approaching this ultimately in a structured manner, trying to get all the data. So to help myself and the analyst, I created this tool. I don't have fancy QR code, but I have quite easy Bitly, I believe, shortcut. So I created a spreadsheet that from one side lists the data or the data points that could be derived from an indicator. So for IP address like geolocation, ASN, registrar, hosting, services like open ports, TLS configuration, and so on. And from other side provides this template where you can expand or you can take notes of the indicators, and you can take note of your pivots. So for example, for this IP address, please do not block it on your firewalls, because this is IP address of my personal website. I broke it down essentially into ownership information. So ASN, from who is, you could see that it hosted on OVH. Then on the service configuration, of course, as its website, it will have HTTP, HTTPS ports, and configuration of the TLS service, which is in form of the JARM hash, which captures how the service is configured, and we can pivot from this. And the second part that I talk about is that we can, within the spreadsheet, we can take note of the various aspects of the indicator that we would like to use, and then make notes of whatever the values and how we can pivot is further. In case of, for example, we have few shotgun queries, so you can combine them in a single search and manipulate based on those. So let's get actually to the examples and some common infrastructure hunting strategies and how it translates to them. So threat actors, fortunately, are quite lazy, as we all are. So if we look at one of the favorite tools that is out there among e-crime and state-sponsored actors alike, Cobalt Strike. Of course, Cobalt Strike should be only used by red teams, but it unfortunately is available in cracked form. And also, it's got a feature of malleable profiles, so you can essentially create a template of how the Cobalt Strike, I think it's called Team Server, will be appearing online, and as such you can evade actually the researchers. But if you will look at GitHub, if you will search for the example of those, you will very quickly find the examples of malleable profiles, such as this one that imitates jQuery. And going by the configuration, essentially looking at what is included in this template, you will find a wealth of data that you can input into your searches, then you can work with as part of your queries. So here, for example, I found the headers that were used or configured, how this service will appear on the internet. I have found also the certificate and the user agents. And to be honest, I mean, I was not looking for super sophisticated example, because this is TLP clear presentation, but I was just wondering like if it is used at all. I mean, this is the first thing that I grabbed from GitHub. I was kind of expecting that it won't be that popular, but just putting the certificate characteristics and the user agent string actually returned a single active Cobalt Strike server. So even for this very, very low-hanging fruit, the data is out there. And now, because we have already this insight that someone is using in a similar manner the Cobalt Strike, we would like to extend this and know what to do if the things will change. So looking at the characteristic of this, we can see the jQuery certificate that we saw, but we can also see, for example, the JARM, so the configuration of the TLS service. We can see TLS version, we can see the port that was used. So combining those, we will come back to the spreadsheet, and we will see that for this kind of, let's say, campaign, this kind of use of detailed use for Cobalt Strike jQuery profiles, profiles. We could, for example, map those user agent strings. We could map certificate common name, fingerprint, authority. Then we could add stuff like the JARM hash, and then taking some characteristic further, seeing which we can discard because we're modified by threat actors, we can maintain this line of sight with the current campaign. So one thing to approach this is going for the, let's say, ready-made profiles. But for the post-exploitation framework, the other approach that we can take and will lead us to similar solution is essentially a code review. So another very popular post-exploitation C2 framework is Mythic. I believe it's maintained by SpectreOps, and it's quite well documented. The code is available on GitHub, and as such, we can, of course, as defenders, try to understand how the threat actors are doing. So when we will start browsing the code, when we will start looking for stuff like headers, stuff like profiles, so searching in the GitHub repository, we can see that Mythic is also working on profiles. We can see some default server port. We can see how the C2 instances are, how C2 instances are initiated, and what the threat actor or red teamer would need to input for this to work. And as such, we can once again use it as the start of our research. And using this information, of course, we could quite easily find the instances of Mythic on Shodan, for example. But as we see here, I mean, this is just a run-of-the-mill server, and it's not very hidden. Let's put it mildly. I mean, the SSL certificate is issued to Mythic. It's even got the Mythic name, so it was easily recognized by Shodan. I think here the port was default. But when we look into how we can break it down into specifics that will allow us further analysis, then we will, for example, notice a very specific favicon icon. We will notice the certificate. We'll notice that it's not super standard configuration of HTTP headers, so values of those, and think like a header hash, so hash that recreates or that takes notes of the not content, but of which headers are included and how they are put in order in the service, might allow us to help. But let's try to use this, let's say, not very OPSEC-wise direction of having this very specific icon. And looking for this favicon hash, we will see that actually most of the servers that were found on the internet were on this default port, so 7443. But we had also this 8443, which from the kind of sticks out as it is just 1,000 above. Perhaps we could think about 2,000 above and 1,000 below, similar convention of using ports. And in fact, when we would go for this 8443 server, it has been also recognized quite easily by Shodan as Mythic, and we can move further with my favorite part of the TLS configuration in form of a JARM hash. And similarly, for as we did for the profiling Cobalt Strike server, we can create a table like this, showing us the configuration and showing us the pivot points that we have used in terms of discovery. So there are those two use cases for mapping out stuff that's, let's say, open source, that's commonly used by red teams, so code analysis and analysis of the available profiles. But another angle would be, and this will be probably quite common to most researchers, is starting from the open source research, something that has been published, and trying to maintain visibility. So one threat actor that has been making rounds recently is Volt Typhoon. And what I found interesting is that beyond the let's say usual C2 infrastructure, they are using those small home office routers for a C2 infrastructure. So digging into what is available there, I found this analysis from, I believe, Lumen, Black Lotus Labs, which provided a nice visibility, or they did enumeration of those. And starting from this Alien Vault pools, we can first take a look at the IP addresses that were already observed. But here, as this activity was a bit ongoing one, I thought that it is not enough to have just the IP addresses and start looking on the on Shodan or census because of the issues of outdated findings or just the activity over time. But when we go to the Black Lotus lab blogs, actually they very nicely enumerated the activity timeframes of those IP addresses of proxy routers. So here we can see the ones that were active 2022, 2023, and now taking this temporal aspect into our analysis, we could map out the IP addresses that were mentioned, for example, in 2022, and using a Shodan feature that I don't know why it's not advertised, but when you actually add /history to the Shodan search, you can see the historical data of how Shodan map it out. And using this, we could find the period that Black Lotus Lab mentioned. So for those, it was this 2022. And when we looked at the common characteristic, maybe one more time, we could see the common ports like 22, 443, so something that was likely exposed there. And looking at the specifics of those, I have found that for the port 443 and the configuration of the certificate, they used quite specific organization with this BBC at bbc.com, which I suspected is not actually British Broadcasting Corporation. So looking at those examples, we could already tell that perhaps the certificate is something that the threat actor will based on for their future infrastructure. And looking at an example that was a bit recent, so 2023 activity, we could see that in fact the certificate changed, but the value, this JDYFJ, is also quite unique. So pivoting just by this string, we are able to establish the servers that are active now. So we got confirmation that the activity is ongoing, let's say, under this new profile. And again, using dropping back to the pivoting methodology that I prefer and the spreadsheet, we could map out the, let's say, common characteristic that we have observed from the open source intelligence. And basing on our findings, we could further pinpoint, for example, here to the favorite hosting provider, or again the favorite TLS configuration, and as such move on our own then with research of this activity. So essentially, the summary of what we are expecting from threat actors here can be summarized by this quote by a quite popular artist, that if you find your spot, if you are lucky to be different here in terms of the different way you are setting infrastructure, never change. And this is something that we would expect and would like to request from all the threat actors. But what happens when this is not so aligned, or what can be the results of when you are not taking this infrastructure analysis into consideration is, I had this great example. There was very interesting report a few years ago, I believe 2019, from Recorded Future, where they described the APT10 campaign targeting here Norwegian MSPs, US companies, and sustained campaigns. And I think this report was also quite controversial because they claimed that they have high confidence in this APT10 assessment. And when we go into details, we can see references to the malware that was used, the side loading of DLLs, the use of Notepad++, and deployment of the APT10 vector. So very much capabilities-based assessment of what has been going on. Further, also, the hands-on keyboard operation for profiling for attribution. So use of certain living of the land tools, use of Mimikatz and WinRAR as to perform actions on host, and finally this intent angle or this adversary angle, so that APT10 is indeed known for targeting MSPs. So that's how they came into conclusion. But then researcher from Microsoft Threat intelligence team came up on Twitter and said, hey, this is not actually APT10. This is APT31, or in the Microsoft taxonomy, it was zirconium before they changed name they had some time ago. And this is because the C2 infrastructure that was mentioned in the report was actually registered in a way that they attribute to this zirconium threat group. And fortunately, the researcher Ben went further and described in a very detailed manner how they are tracking this activity. So we had this one name servers and then switch to the other name servers. We had the hosting provider. We had also adjacent activity in the net blocks allocated to the infrastructure. So when having this kind of breakdown, we can essentially drop down and try to recreate the methodology that Microsoft used here. By taking those indicators, we talked about the use of characteristics, like how the service was created, the temporal patterns, the hosting providers, looking at IP ranges, and we can see how this was actually derived to use very distinct the very distinct profile of activity, something that is likely much more distinct than things like using Mimikatz or using a Trochilius malware, which may proliferate among more, let's say, higher number of threat actors. So coming to the conclusions and just start things wrapping up, I mean, also my issue that I'm having and I'm working on is how to share those kind of indicators. Because sharing atomic indicators due to their rapid rotation, from my perspective, is not very useful and does not go into the gist, into the clue of why we are doing this infrastructure analysis. So actually I was going to say last year, but it was just in November, I was also on the first conference, and there was this guy who happened to also work at Standard Chartered, going by the name Bartek, and he was presenting the Vertex Synapse platform, and he even included this tagline, Synapse or it did not happen. And I have to say, I'm not affiliated with Vertex in any way, but how the Vertex Synapse approaches this kind of sharing of indicators and storing the database can be something that we might consider for our own endeavors. So during using Synapse, we can of course use it as a platform to run queries. So like census queries that I have used for the jQuery profiles of Cobalt Strike that we talked about, and then when we get those nodes, as they are called in the platform, ingested, they are created at something like this. So we got the results of our query, but we also get the data point, the node here, IT exec query, and this node actually stores the content of the search. So we have here the URL, so it essentially means what the service that we search against, and we have text, so we have the complete query. And I think this is something that as threat intelligence analysts we should strive for and we should operationalize, because sharing the methodology, sharing how we approach, how we discover this infrastructure is much more valuable than sharing just the indicator. As we saw with the Volt Typhoon activity, it is not enough to have the list of indicators, because some were used in 2022, some were used in 2023, probably a new ones will be used now in 2024. But having this possibility to share how you arrive at those conclusions, having a possibility to share how you discover the activity and how you will be continuing to be looking at this third actor, is something that can benefit us, I believe, in much longer term. So on that note, I'd like to thank you all for your attendance, especially that is last presentation of the day. So thank you for keeping up. And yeah, if we have any questions and time for questions, then I'm of course very happy to answer. I will be around. So please feel free to reach me.